canopy trees are blooming. The mighty Amazon River floods, and a green blanket of vegetation rises as far as the eye can see. Mother Nature overwhelms this animal paradise with unprecedented abundance. Fresh fruit sprouts even from under stones, and the vastness at the lowest levels of the food chain creates an unprecedented glut of prey. Faced with such a waste of resources, the air fills with hormones, and each wild species, driven by the sheer desire to extend its lineage, begins a breeding season that will be anything but peaceful. Each species faces its own challenges in the competition to spread its lineage through the generations. Following the mandate to be fruitful and multiply, the jaguar, an apex predator, demonstrates all its savagery to its peers, fighting for access to the fertile females in their domains. Macaws, colorful birds, fill the skies with their elaborate nuptial flights in a dance whose sole purpose is copulation. And in a twist of nature, female capuchins take the initiative and put all their effort into courting a formidable alpha. When the prize is the survival of the species, nothing stands in the way. In capybara herds, dominant males wield their power to monopolize the right to reproduce, while subordinates patiently await their opportunity to rebel. Even when night falls in the Amazon, these rituals, which aim to engage in sexual intercourse, don't end. In the darkness, the bats, in a kind of representation of the world's oldest profession, pay the females with food for their services as companions. In the wild, anything goes, as long as the result is extending the lineage for another generation. In this ecosystem filled with dominant testosterone-fueled males, all eager to reproduce with countless females, fertile females are often a scarce resource. For this reason, when a female is at stake, violence is often the only solution to resolve conflicts. It's easier than it seems. Whoever survives gets the female, along with the precious right to copulation. This perfect example of the survival of the fittest is clearly reflected in the mating season of a voracious reptile that lives in the turbulent waters of the treacherous Amazon River. In those dark swamps where sunlight rarely reaches, the fearsome anaconda sits motionless, cold and serene, with firm intentions of making its species grow. Once the breeding season of this cruel reptile, weighing up to 200 kilograms and measuring 10 meters in length, has begun, the female is the one who will be in charge of the heat. When she is ready to reproduce, she uses an olfactory signal to attract all the males who are near her cozy home in the wild Amazon. Thus, the same sense that helps them deliver a painful death to hundreds of defenseless prey is what they use to bring the miracle of life and guarantee the supremacy of these killing machines in an ecosystem they rule with an iron fist. Day after day, the males in the area will pick up on the unmistakable scent of a female in heat. With such a provocative invitation, it's basically impossible for one of these ruthless predators to resist the show. However, with such a high demand for fertile females and very little supply, the male anacondas that come to this place in the swamp know well that there is no peaceful way to resolve this dispute. Each anaconda that makes its triumphant arrival at the breeding ground must fight for what is more of a privilege than a right. Upon arrival, the male anaconda coils around the female's body, attempting to reach her reproductive organs. However, this won't be as easy as it sounds. Shortly after this anaconda's arrival, another male arrives, intent on expanding his lineage. He won't be left alone watching his competitor seize the coveted female. Thus, day after day, driven by the pheromones released by the female, up to dozens of anacondas will arrive to take what they claim is theirs. As a new specimen is added, a large mass called a breeding ball takes shape. In these mating balls, each male fights fiercely to be the lucky one who manages to fertilize the female. Although these hand-to-hand combats don't usually involve major bites, each contender tries to push his opponents to reach the place of honor on the female's reproductive organ. The desire to mate is such that males can spend up to 15 days coiled around the one who could be the future mother of their young, trying to subdue their rivals, and at the same time, show themselves to the female as the best contender. Throughout these prolonged battles for the right to procreate, the female occasionally allows a male to copulate with her. During a mating season, a female often copulates with a large number of males. Of course, she always gives priority to the largest and strongest males, who are able to reach her amidst the overwhelming breeding season. Although the female doesn't usually have a say in choosing which male she mates with, she can adopt positions that favor one partner or the other. In a species where the female is much larger than the males, even enclosed in a gigantic ball surrounded by robust reptiles, she has a certain degree of mobility. Often, when a male manages to position himself on the female's reproductive organ, and she is receptive, copulation can last up to 4 hours, a not inconsiderable amount of time after all the effort it took. Having done his job, the male, with his testosterone levels sky high and having managed to fertilize the female, will abandon the mating ball, as all that pheromone-driven desire has been fulfilled. However, for the female anaconda, this is not the end, as to ensure reproductive success, she will allow other males to have the pleasure of copulating with her. With fewer and fewer contenders coiled around the female, the remaining males give their all to try to reach the coveted spot for her reproductive organ. Once they have mated with enough males, it will all be over, and the unlucky contenders will have to leave empty-handed, with that desire for copulation intact. Although some males may become insistent, wanting in a way, to force the female to mate with them, it is best to leave quickly the way they came. It is not a very sensible idea to stay in the territory of a larger snake that has gone up to 2 weeks without eating anything. Given her physical superiority, after copulating with the most voluptuous males who have managed to subdue the rest in the mating balls, the female anaconda, not letting her opportunity slip by, subdues one of these potential suitors and makes him part of her diet. Although it may be extremely cruel, turning momentarily cannibalistic is more than justified by the reptile's long fast and the nutritional needs of the now mother. With a full stomach and a gestation period of up to 7 months, the female decides to take refuge in a safe place, where she can escape the busy wildlife of the Amazon. Because you never know when a ferocious jaguar decides to set its sights on this feared reptile. Despite gestating eggs, as an ovoviviparous female, the anaconda does not lay eggs. Instead, it gives birth to its young. When the time comes, 20 to 40 tiny anacondas emerge from their mother's robust body through the reproductive organ. Unlike other animal species, the anaconda has zero maternal instinct, leaving its young to fend for themselves at the mercy of the ruthless Amazonian wildlife. The same law of survival of the fittest that allowed them to be born will determine whether they survive this delicate stage of their lives and become gigantic predators, masters of this hostile ecosystem that shows the slightest mercy to its young. While in the grotesque world of anacondas, males, upon sensing the intoxicating scent of pheromones, do everything possible to find the female, several hundred kilometers away from these dense swamps, deep within the blessed biome offered by the Amazonian canopy. female white-fronted capuchin monkeys decide to take the initiative in reproduction. Living in a troop of up to 30 individuals, with a very complex social hierarchy, the females of these wild primates do not remain as damsels waiting for the male and take the reins of courtship. In a group where both males and females have their social hierarchy, female monkeys that come into heat generally prefer to be receptive to larger and stronger individuals, where the alpha, of course, is the most favored. Just as male anacondas strive to reach the female's reproductive organs, capuchin monkeys find ways to attract the attention of the burly alpha. Courtship begins with the capuchin's varied repertoire of vocalizations. To gain the alpha's interest, females emit soft squeaks and chirps, which aim, without any hesitation, to signal to the male their full intention to mate. The pattern and frequency of these vocalizations can be a reliable indicator of the female's estrus phase, sending a clear signal to the male that they want to conquer her fertility. If vocalizations don't bear fruit, the capuchin monkeys may increase the intensity of their strategy a bit, approaching the male, sitting near him, and occasionally making eye contact. The most daring females may even initiate subtle physical contact, brushing against his body, leaning against him, and even grooming certain areas of his fur. All with the aim of attracting the attention of the potential father of her future offspring. To further raise the temperature of courtship, in a wink-like behavior, some female contenders seeking the right to mate with the strong alpha may make facial expressions, such as repeatedly opening and closing their mouths and wiggling their eyebrows. During the capuchin's complex breeding season, the peculiar case sometimes arises where the male is unwilling to mate with the female courting him, so the rejected female monkey has two alternatives. The first is, in a somewhat toxic behavior, to increase the intensity of her courtship, almost harassing the alpha until he tires and finally gives in to her charms. The other alternative is, in a show of self-respect, to seek out other lower-ranking males who do value her as the mother of their young. Females who choose the first option can become quite insistent, chasing the alpha, turning what were once subtle vocalizations into loud cries, and discreet grooming into fur pulling. When the dominant male has no more females vying for him, he may choose to accept those females he may not have found very attractive. On the other hand, those females who decide to stop begging the alpha and instead seek a partner lower on the social ladder tend to have better reproductive opportunities. Often, subordinate males do not even allow females to become insistent in showing themselves receptive to courtship, and with just a few vocalizations, interaction between the pair begins. Some capuchin monkeys, seeking greater reproductive success, may court several males at the same time, which stimulates competition for females. This skillful competitor will be able to watch the males compete for her and may choose the strongest as the father of her offspring. Although mating with lower-ranking males may be much easier, it is not without its dangers. Even after being rejected by the alpha, if the dominant male learns that one of his subordinates has copulated with a female, he may face hostility from a jealous, much larger and stronger alpha. Although no male capuchin is likely to complain about the presence of a female in heat in his troop, sometimes a fertile primate can be the source of friction that leads the troop to war with another group. When several capuchin packs live in a relatively small territory, attempts to kidnap females in heat are more than routine. Males eager to reproduce are willing to risk their lives and even lead their entire pack into a violent altercation just to abduct a fertile female. As soon as he finds an invader trying to steal a female, the alpha will come out to protect what's his, along with all the larger males in the troop. It usually begins with loud yells and barks, intended to dissuade the invader from his disloyal intentions. In the best-case scenario, upon being discovered, he decides to abandon the woman who could have been the mother of his children and run for his life. However, when the intruder refuses to give up on keeping the female, the alpha, along with the other males in the group, will not react very peacefully. Here, bites and scratches are the weapons the troop will use to assert its will. Fortunately, common sense usually prevails during these raids, and the stranger usually turns around and flees the way he came. Not far from the capuchin monkey territory, in what appears to be just a green corner with thick vegetation, lies the ingenious praying mantis. Motionless and very well camouflaged. Given its small size, no larger than 9 centimeters, and its extremely camouflaged appearance which hides it from its numerous predators. The praying mantis might seem like just one of the countless insects that inhabit the Amazon rainforest. However, when mating season arrives, it proves to be one of the most fascinating species that have chosen the Amazon as their cozy home. When the insatiable desire to procreate floods the tiny body of the female mantis, simulating the gigantic anaconda, she spreads her pheromones into the air, emitting a clear call to all those males who are in the vicinity of her little corner of the Amazon. Upon receiving the signal of a female ready to mate, the very interested males, without wasting time, will begin their journey towards what could be their next reproductive partner. Surprisingly, this tiny insect's pheromone signal can be detected at considerable distances, which is why numerous suitors usually show up for the promising date. Some male praying mantises, eager to procreate without the slightest hesitation, race toward the female, and when they spot her on the horizon, they pounce on her body, immersed in an ecstatic desire to copulate. However, since the female is larger and heavier, and usually not very friendly in temperament, these males end up tied up in just seconds, becoming part of the victims, and soon, part of the diet of this now not very attractive mate candidate. After trial and error by a few suitors, a more experienced male appears in the distance, and, with his reproductive experience, knows exactly how to approach the one who is minutes away from becoming one of his new conquests. The skillful male approaches with extreme caution the branch where the female perches placidly, resembling nothing more than a leaf. Since the slightest misstep can cause the female to fiercely attack her suitor, the male is in no hurry, and armed with patience, controls all his sexual desire to avoid ending up dismembered. As soon as the female mantis sees the male approaching, he remains motionless so as not to betray his position. Occasionally, some courtship experts even move subtly to imitate the movement of plants in the wind. After hours of this stop-and-go game, now close enough, the male, seeing his opportunity, carefully opens his wings and prepares for a leap that could be the last of his life, or perhaps lead him to a moment of ecstasy. With the female mantis surprisingly careless, the male jumps onto her back and quickly immobilizes her by holding her with his legs, in a brief struggle in which the male's life is in imminent danger. Once the female is subdued, the male removes his reproductive organ, shaped like a pair of small forceps, and inserts it into his partner's ovipositor. As a reward for his carefully planned and patient approach strategy, the insect will remain on the female for up to 5 hours until the spermatophore is deposited inside the expectant mother. After a lot of hard work on the part of the male, he will carefully detach himself from the female, for he knows that, even after their moment of passion, she will not hesitate to cruelly murder him, and even Why not? Include him in her menu in a display of the most savage cannibalism. In this first escape, the male usually moves about 50 centimeters away from his recent sexual partner. Since praying mantises have rather poor vision for stationary objects, as long as he remains frozen, his life is not in danger. This tactical stop at a relatively short distance from the copulation site is justified by the great effort the male has had to exert to subdue the more robust female, in addition to having spent such a long time copulating. While the most agile and strong males are able to emerge unscathed, some do not live to tell of their encounter with a fertile female, and a few seconds later, and even before or during copulation, the dreaded female decapitates her suitor. When the female arbitrarily decides to decapitate the man who will father her offspring, copulation can last longer, and there is often even greater reproductive success. With the male's corpse decapitated, the female will not let such a coveted prey go to waste, so she immediately opts to practice sexual cannibalism, swallowing the male's remains. Although this act may seem completely unjustified and born from the female's most perverse intentions, the truth is that it stems clearly from a survival strategy. With a demanding gestation process in the coming days, she needs significant amounts of nutrients to ensure a quality laying of eggs, and what better food than a protein-rich male? Approximately 11 days after copulation, the now widowed female expels an ootheca, a structure that will help protect the young, containing up to 200 eggs. The chosen location is usually one with plenty of sunlight to encourage the development of the larvae. The hatching of the praying mantis's offspring will have to wait a few weeks, and sometimes even months, to see hundreds of nymphs emerge from the eggs. These tiny creatures, just a few centimeters in size, must fend for themselves in the midst of an ecosystem as wild as the Amazon. Fortunately, Mother Nature has made them ardent predators, even from their earliest days. So they'll have no problem hunting small insects to take their place at the top of the food chain in this dangerous jungle. In contrast to the tense and wild courtship and reproduction of the praying mantis, for toucans, this is a time of year when bird pairs declare their love forever and set out to expand their lineage, becoming proud parents. While ferocious anacondas mate in dark swamps, and camouflaged praying mantises copulate unnoticed, hidden in the vegetation, the reproduction of these colorful birds is a true natural spectacle. While toucans' striking beaks already steal the show in this already vibrant ecosystem, their courtship rituals reflect the full nobility of these beaks. It all begins with the male toucan searching for a fresh fruit to present to the female who has dazzled him. Of course, being in the middle of the fertile Amazon, he'll have no trouble finding a gift from nature worthy of that striking female. These gifts usually come in the form of figs, copal, acai, wild coffee, and other berries. Far from having a purely materialistic meaning, when a toucan offers a fruit to a female, he is demonstrating his ability to provide for both her and her future chicks. This is also an important interaction that strengthens the bond between the two birds. Although eye-catching fruit will be the perfect gift to woo a female, a small branch can also do the job very well. When you present the gift, if she's receptive, you can start a little game by tossing the fruit to each other, or even passing it to each other from beak to beak during closer contact. Some females, to show their reciprocity, eat a piece of the fruit and offer some to the male, who will be more than happy to share. This tender scene, which begins courtship, is often followed by acts of grooming, in which the birds gently run their long beaks over their partner's plumage, caressing it, and sometimes performing subtle nibbles, which, in addition to being a sign of true love, helps keep their bodies clean. Nearby wild species that miss this spectacle can likely hear it, as the vocalizations quickly become apparent, contrasting sharply with the profound silence of the Amazon rainforest. Through chirps and trills, the pair expresses their affection. After several minutes, or even hours, sharing fruit and preening each other's striking plumage, with the endless skies at their disposal, the toucans open their large wings and take to the air in gentle flights between the branches, where the pair playfully chase each other and coordinate their movements in a scene that dazzles with such majesty. Unlike the hasty praying mantises, whose courtship lasts only a couple of hours, toucans are usually in no hurry to mate, and rather tend to take their mating life quite slowly. Birds in love can spend several days, even weeks, in an elaborate courtship where the pair's bond strengthens over time. When the female's mating season approaches, the well-planned pair will take to the skies, but this time, not as part of their courtship display, but rather with the goal of finding a cavity comfortable enough to become the family home. Both birds will test various holes in trees, inspecting aspects such as the size of the entrance and the spaciousness of the interior. Having found a nesting box they both like, the pair will begin to settle into their new home. One of the first changes they'll make to make it more welcoming is to regurgitate a few seeds on the floor to soften the nest. Likewise, if there's a lot of vegetation inside, a quick cleanup isn't a bad idea. With the nest now ready, the happy pair will spend more time together than ever, perching side by side on branches, preening for extended periods, and enjoying their new home together in the nest. As the days pass and ovulation approaches, with the toucans never leaving each other's side for even a second, copulation inevitably occurs. This is usually quite brief, lasting a few minutes, with the male mounting the female. Following the act of copulation, after approximately 7 days, the female will lay 2 to 4 eggs in the well-prepared nest. With the white eggs in place, both parents, like the united pair they have proven to be, will take charge of incubating the future chicks. After a maximum of 20 days, with due care from their partner, the tiny chicks will slowly break the shell and officially become inhabitants of this fertile ecosystem called the Amazon. Of course, with their tiny chicks stripped of feathers and their eyes still closed, the parents' work is still far from over. The diligent pair will feed their offspring for about 9 weeks until they are capable of caring for themselves. After almost 3 months of parenthood, the no longer so tiny chicks will be able to fly and spread their wings to leave the nest. However, even then, they won't have said goodbye to their parents, who will be tasked with educating their young about survival in this bountiful yet demanding ecosystem. One of the first lessons will be how to differentiate ripe fruit from unripe fruit. Who knows? Perhaps in a few years, this young toucan will set out in search of fresh fruit to give to a female, starting the cycle all over again and repeating one of the most striking chapters in wildlife. While breeding season compels toucans to settle down in a home and form a family life, for the largest apex predator in this entire wild world, the age-old cry to expand its lineage rather compels it to leave its territory and become an outsider. When dozens of female cats go into heat, spread across hundreds of kilometers in the thick jungle, the fierce and territorial jaguar doesn't hesitate for a second to leave its domain behind and embark on long journeys where, Driven by the sheer desire to reproduce, distances become just a number. With countless females leaving their pheromones scattered in their urine and feces as a clear sign of their fertility, the males go in search of fertile females, thus fulfilling their role in the preservation of the species, and along the way, enjoying several moments of pleasure. Following the pheromone trails left by the females like a map, there's no way for these cats to get lost on their long reproductive journey. There's practically no obstacle that can stand in their way when the destination is a robust female with whom they can mate for up to 5 days. After long walks of tens or even hundreds of kilometers, the male manages to reach his desired destination. Here, as in the ruthless world of the praying mantis, the feline approaches the one who could be about to become his mate with great caution. Before any physical contact, the male emits several signals to announce himself in the form of growls. If the female is receptive, she will respond through vocalizations and body postures, leading to copulation. Once the female has given the long-awaited yes, the male positions himself on top of her, and a marathon journey begins in which both felines copulate up to 100 times a day. Of course, in addition to the pleasure factor, this is a measure to ensure reproductive success, achieving the jaguar's fertilization. Just as the courtship of toucans drowns out the silence of the Amazon, when a pair of jaguars copulates, the deafening noise can be heard for miles around, with loud roars and moans echoing through the deep jungle, again and again. After up to 5 days of non-stop copulation, and with a more than likely pregnancy on the way, the male, without the slightest hesitation, leaves the way he came, ignoring any paternal responsibility. Continuing his life as a bachelor, the jaguar continues his long journey in search of fertile females. However, this feline is not always so lucky in finding solitary females willing to mate. Sometimes, just as he abandoned his territories to undertake this reproductive journey, other jaguars joined him on this mission, and they end up crossing paths. Of course, when this happens, the conflict is far from being resolved peacefully. After traveling enormous distances to reach the female, no feline will leave without having fulfilled its reproductive desire, so hostilities are inevitable. Before engaging in physical combat, both jaguars, in a display of their ferocity, and with the clear intention of intimidating their rival, emit loud growls and snorts, as well as roar vigorously as a preamble to the savagery that is about to occur. Vocalizations aside, and with a receptive female in play, the jaguars pounce on their opponent, their sharp claws and massive bites as weapons. The swipes and bites are everywhere, with both felines showing no mercy, attacking directly at their opponent's neck and head. Possessing one of the most powerful bites in the entire animal kingdom, capable of crushing skulls, the injuries caused in these fights can be serious, even killing one of the combatants. After several minutes of fierce fighting, one of the felines, suffering numerous injuries and completely against its will, decides to withdraw from the fight, renouncing its right to procreate. With his opponent fleeing the scene, the victorious jaguar is ready to claim his prize. Faced with such a display of strength and dominance, the female is quick to show herself receptive to the imposing male, who, despite having been engaged in a grueling battle just minutes before, will exhaust his last breath in a copulation that will last for days. After an average of about 100 days of gestation, the young jaguar, of course also abandoned by the male, gives birth to a pair of tiny cubs weighing just 900 grams. The concerned single mother will meticulously care for her young during their first months of life. With these tender cubs opening their eyes until they are 2 weeks old, the pups are extremely defenseless, and even the slightest danger can destroy the product of an intense mating season. To keep the kittens safe, the mother prefers to shelter them in her den, often a small excavation in the ground where they remain out of sight of dangers such as pumas and alligators. Although these carnivores can be a significant threat to the survival of defenseless pups, sometimes the greatest danger comes from a fellow species member. When a ferocious male eager to procreate comes across small cubs, in a cold-blooded act without the slightest trace of mercy, he will end the lives of the unprotected young. Far from being an action purely intended to instill terror, this is a reproductive strategy to stimulate the mother's entry into heat. Without her pups, the fertile days of her cycle soon arrive, and the killer of her offspring will be there to take advantage of the opportunity to expand his genes, demonstrating the harshness of the wild world in the competition for reproduction. With the relentless jaguar forcing the female into heat, far away on the banks of the mighty Amazon River, one of the feline's favorite prey also feels nature's call to expand the family. Faced with the abundance of abundance filling every corner of the capybara's cozy habitat, the females soon go into heat. With such high levels of hormones in their bodies, these giant rodents emit powerful pheromones capable of attracting dozens of intoxicated males. Although all male capybaras perceive the female's receptive signal, achieving copulation will not be an easy task. The social life of these large mammals is governed by a very rigid hierarchical structure, with the top tier being an all-powerful alpha, jealous of his females. This formidable male is followed by the females of the pack, along with their young offspring. Last and least important are the subordinate males, who, as long as the alpha can prevent it, may not even approach a fertile female. Shortly after smelling the intoxicating pheromone scent of a capybara in heat, the alpha male quickly initiates courtship, tirelessly pursuing the female and emitting vocalizations in the form of whistles and clicks. Additionally, to initiate contact, the male may rub his nasal gland against the female's rough body. In the consensual world of capybara reproduction, the female can decide to say yes or, on the contrary, reject her suitor. When she is receptive to her suitor, she will express it through various vocalizations and head movements. Given their prodigious swimming abilities and the fast-flowing Amazon rivers at their feet, copulation could not possibly take place anywhere other than underwater. In this situation, the female partially submerges herself, lowering her rear end slightly to make it easier for the male. Mounting her from behind, he performs some rapid pelvic movements in an act that lasts only a few seconds. After the brief mating session, the male dismounts the female and leaves the water. Meanwhile, the capybara shakes its coarse fur and continues with its daily activities. Of course, since copulation has been somewhat brief, the male, to ensure reproductive success, is likely to try to mount the female again during all these days of heat. With packs that can house up to dozens of females eager to mate, the alpha will not pass up this opportunity, and in a show of lack of fidelity, will seek to court all the females who are receptive. Of course, not even the largest male will be able to mate with all the female rodents. And this is when the subordinate males see their moment. Against the wishes of the alpha, these members of the lower strata of the group, even in their unattractive position, can have access to a considerable number of females. Of course, as long as the alpha is busy courting another female, no one needs to know about the transgressions of males from less privileged backgrounds. Here, being able to copulate in just seconds becomes a real advantage. However, problems arise when a subordinate male is caught red-handed by the alpha trying to court one of his females. The strongest and most robust male will not tolerate an offense of such proportions and will immediately reprimand the offender. Usually, some displays of intimidation, such as raising their fur, showing their sharp teeth, and emitting loud roars will be enough to force the smaller male back into his place in the social hierarchy. When the opportunistic male is reluctant to give in to courtship, the alpha, with no other option, resorts to violence to demonstrate why he is dominant. By delivering sharp bites with his terrifying teeth, the alpha ensures that this violation of the pack hierarchy will never happen again. Once the alpha has completed his duties with the females in heat, they begin a gestation period of approximately 110 days. After this period, the capybara will give birth to between 1 and 8 small rodents. Unlike copulation, birth usually takes place on land, and shortly after giving birth to her young, the female returns to the herd with her young. These young offspring, just a few hours old, are surprisingly precocious, born with their eyes open, thick fur, and shortly after separating from their mother's womb, they can even walk. The rapid incorporation of youngsters into the pack is entirely based on a measure of protection for their offspring. Despite their precocious development, these tiny rodents are still completely defenseless against countless predators, so a large group full of adults is a much safer space for them. Adult capybaras are often gentle with their young, caring for and protecting them, even if they are not their own children. A clear example of this is the communal nurseries that can form in some packs, where a few females are responsible for nursing and protecting the young, while the others forage for food. During this tender stage of their lives, the young capybaras must learn from their mother everything they need to ensure their survival in this wild ecosystem. With the capybaras expanding their already large herd, we once again enter the deepest recesses of the tropical rainforest. Here, unbeknownst to the rest of the ecosystem, one of the most colossal battles for the right to access a female is about to unfold. As with almost all wild species, in the case of rhinoceros beetles, the start of hostilities is usually associated with a young female entering heat, filling the air with extravagant pheromones. With this unequivocal chemical signal that a female is available for mating, the males of this striking insect species soon embark on a long journey into the unknown, which, they hope, will eventually lead them to the mating of a female. With several males summoned to this event, of course, the fights are not long in coming. Since the prize is access to a coveted female, the suitors know what they must do to claim the prize. It's not hard to guess why this species is named after it, because just looking at its prominent horn, it's almost impossible not to think of the colossal African mammals. And when engaging in a duel where the stakes are so high, the imposing males will not hesitate to use this formidable weapon that Mother Nature has given them. Since a male specimen doesn't grow to more than 8 centimeters in length, the wild species that inhabit the surrounding area probably won't even notice the bloody duel that is about to begin. But their small size doesn't mean the battle is free from savagery like never before seen. With each contender charging at their opponent, the objective is to push the opponent until they are lifted up and turned over, or until, after extreme fatigue, they decide on their own to give in to the opponent's physical strength. However, when two battle veterans cross paths, surrender is far from certain, and each insect will fight with all its might, trying to subdue its opponent. Although deeply focused on the fight, both suitors don't forget that they are in the middle of the dangerous Amazon, and being small insects no more than 8 centimeters long, they are not exactly at the top of the food chain. Even in the midst of these reproductive duels, The skillful insects can take brief pauses when they spot the approach of a hungry reptile, or perhaps a small rodent on the horizon. For them, survival is still more important than copulation. Another reason for stopping this bloody confrontation is the withdrawal of the female in dispute. When she leaves the arena, both beetles follow her to keep an eye on other potential suitors. Now free from predators, and with the female close enough to witness the battle, the two insects resume their ruthless confrontation. The technique used by the most seasoned dueling beetles is to thrust their intimidating horn under the opponent's body, and then, in a single movement, flip them over. However, this is much easier said than done, as the opponent won't just wait to be subdued. As with all wild species, in these confrontations, the larger and more robust males often have an insurmountable advantage over the smaller ones. Although these small-scale duels for the right to reproduce may seem harmless, the truth is that the rhinoceros beetle is nothing less than the strongest animal on the planet, capable of lifting up to 850 times its weight. With this in mind, serious injuries resulting from these fights, far from being atypical, have become routine. In addition to using their prominent horn as leverage to flip their opponent, each beetle also uses its robust body to push, as well as its clawed feet to resist each attack. After several minutes of hostilities, one of the combatants manages to restrain its opponent, either by flipping it over or by pulling it from the branch where the fight was taking place. With the competition no longer in his way, the newly minted male begins a brief courtship. Emerging victorious in a relentless battle doesn't mean he'll force himself on the female. Using its antennae, the beetle initiates gentle body contact, and suggestive postures are also present. With the female open to copulation, the male fulfills his desire by positioning himself above or behind her. Supporting himself with his legs, the beetle holds the female firmly, ensuring that she does not move during the act. With everything ready, the excited male inserts his aedegus into the female's genital opening, and copulation begins, which can last for several minutes. Having fulfilled his part, the beetle, with all his wishes fulfilled, will leave without looking back the way he came, leaving all the laborious preparations for laying the eggs to the female. After being fertilized, the female, like a diligent single mother, will look for a suitable place to lay her eggs. The ideal location is usually close to a food source, ensuring the survival of the future larvae. As soon as she spots a pile of rotting wood, leaf litter, or even mounds of manure, the mother will have found the perfect place to lay her eggs. Far from staying to protect her future offspring, the beetle completely ignores their maternal care, leaving them to their fate and continuing with her life. After a few weeks of incubation, tiny larvae hatch from the eggs and immediately begin feeding on decaying organic matter. This is when the choice of laying mother becomes crucial. After spending up to several months in the larval stage, it reaches its maximum size and burrows into a pupal chamber, where it undergoes countless metamorphoses that result, after several weeks, in a majestic and robust adult rhinoceros beetle. Back in the sun-drenched canopy areas where toucans display their love in elaborate courtship displays, here, one of these birds enjoys a fresh manduvi seed, while its chicks rest peacefully inside the nest. However, this is not the story of toucans, but of equally colorful birds that fill the Amazonian skies with a deep blue. For the hyacinth macaws, that tiny mandubi seed that the toucan devoured will, over the years, become the home of a colorful family of these birds. Soaring through the skies of these vibrant tropical forests, the reproduction of hyacinths is one of the most majestic and delicate acts of the entire Amazonian ecosystem. As colossal birds, up to a meter long, hyacinths necessarily require nesting in gigantic, long-lived trees with spacious cavities capable of accommodating their enormous size. This is when the manduvi trees planted by toucan seed dispersal become the perfect home for starting a family. However, before finding a home, it's much more important to win over a female. While wild species like praying mantises reach sexual maturity just a few weeks after birth, patient hyacinth macaws can take up to a decade until their bodies are ready to expand into the species. Of course, after up to 10 years preparing for this moment, once sufficiently mature, the hyacinth will not wander from flower to flower copulating with every female that crosses its path. But, showing itself to be extremely faithful, will choose a partner for life. Of course, since this is not a one-time adventure, the male will have to make an effort to win over the woman who could be his partner for the next 40 years. Having waited years for this moment, the male knows exactly what to do to captivate the female with a very elaborate courtship display. As if his striking appearance as a beautiful blue bird were not enough, this conqueror approaches the female emitting soft vocalizations in order to attract her attention. If the female is receptive, the male macaw will slowly approach, and the next step is to preen the beautiful plumage of the woman he hopes will be his lifelong mate. When she is interested in the suitor, she responds with mutual preening. Seeing these colorful birds perched on a branch, with the imposing Amazonian sunsets behind them, is one of the unique images that this wild paradise offers. To show himself as a reliable provider, the male, imitating the behavior of toucans, often brings succulent gifts to the female in the form of juicy mangoes, bananas, berries, and seeds. These coveted gifts from the macaw are often shared by the pair, while the vocalizations are a clear sign that all is well in these birds' romantic lives. In the case of these birds that have been together for a long time, synchronized flights are a true work of nature. With their large blue wings, the pair takes off in unison and flies over long distances, separating themselves by only a few centimeters in what seems more like a wild dance in the air. With the mating season slowly approaching, the pair now sets out to find a cozy home to establish their family. However, this isn't usually as simple a task as it is for the more compact toucans. Hyacinth macaws require impressive cavities that can accommodate their entire slender body, spaces that only trees like the sexagenarian manduvi trees typically possess. After an exhaustive search, the couple has found their long-awaited home. With a few small improvements, such as enlarging the cavity and removing any vegetation debris, the nest will be ready to welcome the chicks yet to arrive. The moment the male hyacinth bird has long awaited has arrived, and with the female in her fertile years, the bird is quick to mount her. Although their nest is perfectly arranged, hyacinth birds prefer to mate from a branch, with the female leaning her small body forward and the male perching on her, holding her feathers in his talons. Once the male is in position, copulation takes place, lasting only a few seconds. With their reproductive organs aligned, the male transfers his sperm to the female, and officially, chicks are on the way. During the few seconds that the mount lasts, it is normal for the male to flap his wings vigorously to maintain balance and avoid becoming unstable, while he consummates his desire to procreate with his partner. While capybaras separate immediately after copulation, hyacinth capybaras often perch for extended periods, grooming each other and demonstrating their close bond through tender vocalizations. During the female's mating season, this very stable pair usually copulates numerous times to ensure reproductive success. Once the success of mating has been confirmed by the laying of a pair of opaque white eggs, The future parents, closer than ever, will care for them, incubating them, and protecting them from predators. This is when toucans show one of their wildest sides. Because, despite being responsible for giving a home to this beautiful family, these beaks are also responsible for more than 80% of the predation of hyacinth macaw eggs. So both the female and the male must be alert to the approach of what are now their enemies. After up to 30 days of incubation, the long-awaited moment has arrived. Slowly, a tiny chick breaks out of the shell with its tiny beak, meeting its very proud parents. While it's true that the female has laid 2 eggs generally in the complex reproduction of hyacinth birds, when the hatching of an egg takes longer than expected, only the first chick has a chance of survival, as the larger and stronger older sibling doesn't usually leave any food for the less developed chick, so it ends up dying of hunger. With hyacinth macaws facing all the challenges that parenthood entails, not far from their cozy canopy habitat, one of the most patient reproductive rituals in all of wildlife is about to take place. Although at the pace at which the slow-moving sloth travels, there may still be a few days to go. When Mother Nature, in an ancestral call, orders these lethargic but fascinating mammals to multiply, the sloths demonstrate all their resilience by undertaking a journey of several days until they reach that promised place where they hope there will be a warm female welcoming them with open arms. In the slow but steady mating season of sloths, it all begins with the fertile female announcing her readiness for copulation by emitting high-pitched calls that can carry for miles around. Upon hearing this beloved sound, all the sloths in the vicinity of the female will begin a full-throttle journey through the canopy. Of course, as one of the slowest animals in the wild, this top speed won't even exceed 2 kilometers per hour, so the female will have to be quite patient waiting for her slow-moving suitors. Not being particularly marathon runners, each individual only manages to travel about 38 meters a day. Since it lives in the middle of the dense Amazon rainforest, the sloth can move relatively faster by hanging between branches. Since there are countless wild species on the ground waiting for the mammal to descend to prey on it, it's always best to stay high up. With all the momentum that the constant calls of a female in heat can generate, the slow herbivore advances steadily, without the slightest distraction. Of course, this isn't enough to go against his slow nature, and the sloth, after several days of travel, finally reaches the meeting place. Upon arrival, the male confirms that everything promised is true, and the female is receptive to copulation, while species such as the flamboyant hyacinth macaws and the social capuchins perform striking courtship displays, in which practically the entire ecosystem takes note of their spectacle. The much more timid sloth courts the female in a subtle but effective manner. Through slow approaches, sniffing, and gentle movements, he plans to conquer the fertile female, winning her favor for copulation. When the female is receptive, the male, at cruising speed, positions himself behind and above the female, proceeding with a surprisingly rapid penetration. Since high branches are the perfect refuge for these harmless mammals, copulation could not take place anywhere other than hanging acrobatically several meters above the ground. Occasionally, some couples manage to strike quite interesting poses, including both individuals upside down while copulating. Although on this occasion he was lucky to find a female not coveted by other males, sometimes, after marathon days of travel, the sloth is surprised to find that he must fight for the privilege of procreating. Of course, these fights bear no resemblance to the struggles of jaguars or the powerful rhinoceros beetles. Being completely harmless, The greatest display of ferocity that one of the suitors can muster is slow, clumsy struggles among the branches, with attempts at fighting that are completely lacking in lethality. Although these blows wouldn't even injure a young animal, the objective is to demonstrate physical superiority and dominance over the opponent. With these intentions, vocalizations can also be very effective in intimidating the opponent, so that, after assessing its chances of victory, the latter eventually gives in and flees in a far from swift manner. With the victorious male having earned the right to procreate after a harmless confrontation, and having already mounted the female, a long countdown begins for the birth of a tiny offspring. The gestation period for these mammals is no less than 11.5 months, so the female must be patient until her offspring is born. The acrobatic birth will take place, of course, while the female hangs from a high branch, several meters above the ground, where her young will be safe from predators. Fortunately, after almost a year of gestation, the newborn is surprisingly well developed, with thick fur and sharp claws. Despite this, and not forgetting that it's an innocent cub, the mother will take care of it, cuddling it in her belly and nursing it so it grows healthy and strong. As the months pass, the no longer little cub begins to explore the surroundings of this vibrant ecosystem on its own, of course, always staying relatively close to its mother, who teaches it how to find food and navigate through the trees. After maternal care that can last, in some cases, up to 2 years of age, the young sloth decides to go its own way, separating forever from its self-sacrificing mother, who has given everything she has for the survival of her offspring. Now, only time and nature will tell whether all her teachings were sufficient or not. One of the survival lessons the sloth mother taught her offspring was most likely to avoid descending from trees, especially in swampy areas, as these tributaries with zero visibility harbor countless dangers. However, the still naive mammal, leaving this lesson behind, ignores it and dares to dive into what appears to be a warm wetland. In this tributary, the young sloth has unwittingly made a mistake that will cost him his life. In just seconds, in the blink of an eye, a voracious black caiman up to 6 meters long appears from the dark waters, and in an instant, takes the life of a mammal that had only lived a couple of days away from its mother's shelter. After this unparalleled display of ferocity, and in a complete U-turn, the imposing alligator decides it's time to fill these waters with dozens of small, heartless reptiles. Knowing that mating season is at its peak, he heads straight for those wetlands filled with females eager to procreate. In what seems like the perfect nightmare for any defenseless mammal, dozens of black caimans crowd the vast tributaries created by the bountiful Amazon River. In these, the large males show off all their physical strength through frightening displays with their heads and tails, as well as emitting powerful roars and vibrations in the water, which are intended to capture the attention of the females. Of course, this male has not been the only one to show up at the wetland to enjoy what is quite a harem. Close to him, another ferocious reptile, precisely, has been interested in copulating with the same female, and being two temperamental beasts weighing 400 kilograms and with a lethal bite, it is easy to intuit that these disagreements will not lead to anything good. Immediately upon crossing paths with a female, the two males, seeking to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, emit loud roars intended to show their opponent who's in charge. Similarly, raising their heads out of the water and whipping their tails are essential displays to discourage further interference with the provocative reptile. Most of the time, when a caiman finds itself at a clear physical disadvantage, it chooses not to push its luck and retreats quickly, with thousands of females eager to breed in the endless Amazon. Engaging in life-or-death combat with another deadly predator is completely unjustifiable. However, this is wildlife, and prudence does not always guide the actions of animal species, much less those of the enormous black alligators. When two ferocious reptiles engage in copulation with a female, with nothing more to say, they both begin a fight that echoes through the swamp. In these cases, powerful bites, shoves, and tail whips are the weapons used to subdue the opponent. After only a few minutes, a wounded reptile usually gives up and gives in to its attempts to mate with the female. Of course, for the winner, the story is very different, as he will enter an ecstasy of pleasure during intercourse. To do this, the heavy male climbs onto the female's back, and with the help of his front legs, holds her still. Before copulation begins, the male aligns his reproductive organ with the female's and begins penetration. To help hold the female, the alligator often bites her on the lower part of her neck, ensuring that she will not move. After up to 30 minutes of copulation, the male has already transferred all his sperm to the fertile female, who will appear exhausted after having this colossal beast weighing almost half a ton on her body. After copulation, both reptiles usually rest side by side to regain energy. If the male is lucky, the pair can sometimes mate a few more times to ensure the alligator's pregnancy. Since they belong to a completely monogamous species, both the female and the male, before the breeding season ends, will seek other sexual partners with whom to fulfill all their mating desires. Having copulated countless times, as is almost customary in the wild, the female bears the entire burden of gestation and caring for her young. To this end, she builds a large mound of mud and vegetation at the foot of the wetland, in a strategic location to be close to the water, but avoid flooding. Once the nest is fully prepared, she lays up to 60 eggs. After carefully positioning them, the mother covers them with mud to ensure they stay warm. Temperature is one of the crucial factors in the delicate gestation process of black caimans, and even determines the sex of the young. When the nest is warmer, the young are usually male. The nest, in addition to providing shelter, serves the important function of keeping the eggs protected from predators, since there are countless candidates to eat these protein-rich eggs. After burying her young, the mother will remain near the nest throughout the long incubation process, which can last up to 100 days. During this time, more than one predator from the middle rungs of the food chain will try to devour her eggs, to which the mother, as expected, will react poorly, even making these intruders her prey. After the gestation period, upon hearing a very subtle cry from her young, the mother quickly unearths the nest, only to find her little alligators slowly emerging from their eggs. Of course, some will need their mother's help to break through this hard shell, so the female, using her fierce bite with utmost delicacy, will provide vital support to her young. As soon as they hatch, the reptile carries her tiny babies straight to the water in her mouth. For the next few months, like an exemplary mother, she will protect her offspring from all the dangers of this ecosystem, which is particularly cruel to young. Given that all these small reptiles will, in the not-too-distant future, become the apex predators of this paradise for animal life, there will be no shortage of wild species that, rather than being devoured by these reptiles, will choose to hunt down the defenseless offspring, in a stark demonstration of nature's ingenuity and mercilessness. While the Amazon is an oasis for these species, their delicate reproductive rituals, as well as their very survival, are in grave danger. As a result of human influence on this vast ecosystem, the lives of the countless wild species that live in the Amazon face colossal challenges. For hyacinth macaws, finding manduvi trees each breeding season is a real odyssey, a product of the intense deforestation these forests face. The reproduction of species such as anacondas, capybaras, and crocodiles is seriously threatened due to water pollution as a direct result of mining activities in the area. The indiscriminate use of pesticides in agricultural activities is one of the potential dangers facing insects such as rhinoceros beetles, as well as the ferocious praying mantis. Not even an apex predator like the indomitable jaguar is safe from witnessing how the survival of its species is threatened by the fragmentation of its habitats, preventing it from making its long journeys in search of fertile females. Despite this harsh reality that threatens the existence of every one of the wild inhabitants of the Amazon and their reproductive rituals, all is not lost. Species like the colorful hyacinth macaws are a prime example of how, with coordinated efforts, it is possible to prevent the extinction of these majestic creatures and create a wild paradise where they can flourish in their purest form. Have you enjoyed the stories of seduction, dominance, and the fight for reproduction in the majestic Amazon rainforest? Then don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to continue enjoying all the stories of our planet's ferocious wildlife. If you want to help more and more people learn about these majestic creatures and their battle for survival, you can also share this video with your friends. They're sure to love it. Don't leave without leaving your favorite animal in the comments box. See you next time with another story of brutal predators, skilled prey, and above all, wild lives.